Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Just like your favorite neighborhood bookshop, this show is a place to explore, find hidden gems, and meet new writers from every corner of the publishing world. Feel free to browse around and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm your host, Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and your guide to great conversations with some amazing writers. This is episode number 279. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to leave a review, follow along on social media, and share the podcast with fellow readers. A quick note from me before we get started. I'm just back from Killer Nashville, where I led a workshop and joined a couple of author panels. It was a fantastic experience, and I'll be sharing more about it in my next newsletter. You can sign up through my website, staceyhoran.com, or find me directly on Substack. I'll have all the details there, so be sure to stay tuned. On today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm joined by best-selling author Tess Gerritsen to discuss her latest novel, The Shadow Friends. Tess is the author of more than 30 books, including her famous Rizzoli Isles series. Her novels have been published in more than 40 countries and have sold more than 40 million copies worldwide. The Shadow Friends is the third installment in Tess's Martini Club series, which she says feels especially personal because it explores some of her own thoughts and feelings about growing older. The novel begins with the suspicious death of a renowned disease expert and Russian defector at a conference in Purity, Maine, pulling 5 friends, all retired spies, into yet another dangerous mystery. Retirement, it seems, is not as quiet as they thought it would be. In this episode, Tess reflects on her writing journey, explains how her own small town in Maine inspired the setting and characters for the Martini Club series, and shares why emotional connection, not plot, is ultimately what keeps readers turning pages. All that and more coming up next. Tess Gerritsen, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. This should be fun.
I thought what we could do today is talk about your new series. You have the third book in a new series out, but what I'd like to do is introduce everyone to the Martini Club. And in particular, let's talk about what inspired you to start writing these books.
Yes. This was inspired by the town I happen to live in. I moved to Maine 36 years ago to a little town called Camden, 5,000 people. It was a charming town. It was on the ocean. My husband opened up a medical practice, and he would take occupational histories of his new patients. Now, most of these were retirees, and they would tell him they used to work for the government, but they would not talk about what they did for the government. After about 3 of these patients said, I can't talk about it, we began to ask around because it seemed like a very strange answer. It was our real estate agent who said, oh, they're all retired CIA. This is a town where they come. And I later found out that I had 2 CIA retirees living on my very short street. I found out that the parents of my son's good friend were married retired CIA. We had a bed and breakfast that was run by a CIA and a restaurant. And so I began to wonder, who are these people and why did they end up here? I never really got a good answer for that second question, but I did think there's a book in here. It took me a while to write that book because it took me 30 years, really, because I felt like I had to get older. I had to feel the same sorts of things that other retirees are feeling, the sense of no longer being in the center of attention, that young people will not really pay as much attention to us, that we are maybe chewed up and spit out by society. And I thought, well, what about these people, these retirees who had very interesting, possibly dangerous lives? They're now living in a quiet town. What are they up to? And I began to look at my neighbors, and I'd go to the grocery store and see some little old lady pushing her shopping cart, and I'd think, did you used to carry a gun? So that was the beginning of it. And then one morning I woke up with this voice in my head. It was a woman's voice saying, I'm not the woman I used to be. And that was the prompt I needed to write the first book, The Spy Coast. I wanted to know who this woman was and who did she used to be. And when you hear a voice, what I'm really trying to listen for is the emotions behind what they say to me. And her emotions were sad. Something bad had happened while she was a career agent that made her retire from the agency. And so that was where I introduced my spy, Maggie Bird. She lives in a town just like where I live. She has four friends who are also CIA retirees because they can talk to each other. They get together for cocktails. They have a book club, which very often they don't read the book, but they just get together to drink. And so I wanted to find out what is it like to be a retiree who's had this fascinating life and still has your skill. They still have their skills. They still have their smarts. And what happens if their past comes back to haunt them? So that was book number one, featuring Maggie's past. Book number two was The Summer Guest. It was more a focus on the town where they live in. In Maine, we have an inherent tension between people who live here and people who are visitors or people who come from away. So it was exploring that particular conflict, and my five spies helped the local police chief, who's a young woman, find where a missing teenage girl has gone. And now we're at book three, which is The Shadow Friends, and it's my five spies again. This one focuses on one of the other five, Ingrid, who I think of her as the Hermione of the group. She's the really smart one. The others are smart too, but Ingrid is particularly smart. What's interesting about Ingrid is that she was a covert operative, but she married a total beta male, Lloyd, who was an analyst. He spent his career sitting behind a desk in Langley. And I wondered about their marriage. Why did she choose Lloyd? Why did she choose this man who really prefers to be in the kitchen more than anything else? And what if I put that marriage under threat? So that was really the impetus for the Shadow Friends, was the exploration of this marriage. Why did Ingrid marry this man? What if the marriage suddenly becomes, endangered? And how do I make Lloyd, who up till now has been sort of the comic relief, how do I make Lloyd into a hero? And that was where the Shadow Friends came from.
Yeah, interesting. I notice in the books there is this sort of internal war going on in each of these characters, the ex-spies, between the desire to just be left alone and to live the quiet life and to just be able to relax, but also still feel relevant, feel like they're still in the game. They can't help but be drawn into these crazy events. So I like that tension, and each of them seems to struggle with it in their
Yeah.
own way.
Yeah, well, I think that's true for retirees, no matter what if you had especially an occupation that was intellectual, and these people they haven't turned off their brains. You're always going to be still thinking about what you used to do or how you can use those skills. I bring into this book something that's also based on reality, and that is the Global Affairs Conference. Here in Camden, it's called the Camden Conference. It's been going on for about 40 years. It was started by retired CIA. And every year we get ambassadors and generals and leaders and politicians and journalists who come to our little town in the dead of February to give talks at the Camden Conference. And I think that the reason that conference started was exactly what you're saying. These people still want to be involved. Maybe they're not running around the world, doing CIA stuff, but they have not lost their interest in global affairs. And part of that attraction is the story in this particular book, because a murder takes place at the Global Affairs Conference in the little town in the book.
Right. Well, and as we all know, and how these wildly successful series have taught us, small towns are just ripe for murders and chock full of mayhem and all kinds of crazy things. So the setting of purity,
Hmm.
it sounds idyllic, and yet I can't imagine that any place that houses that many spies wouldn't at least attract a bit of danger or craziness. Now that you've written the setting, now that you have created Purity, is it big enough to hold the series?
Well, that's why I move the series sometimes out of the country. In this particular book, yeah, it starts off in Purity with a global affairs conference and the death of one of their conference speakers who dies in a mysterious way. But the story quickly takes off into international settings because it starts off with Ingrid, as I mentioned. She is like the MC. She's one of the organizers for this conference. And out of the blue comes one of her ex-lovers, who was also a fellow agent. They had an operation go terribly wrong years before in France. Now he has a private intelligence firm, and he wants her help. He's here in town to ask for her help. And she's tempted because number one, she misses some of the action. And number two, he is still a handsome man. He's still very tempting. I imagined Antonio Banderas, who is now, that age and still has it. So very quickly she disappears. Ingrid disappears along with her fellow ex-lover Rodrigo, and the rest of the group wonders where she is, and of course her husband is frantic, and he quickly goes chasing after her, and they end up first in the Netherlands and then in Madrid. So there is a little bit of an international flavor to it. And then the next book, the fourth book in the series, which I'm working on, a lot of that does take place in Europe.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to admit that I felt for Lloyd.
Yes,
One, because it must be hard to be the odd man out,
yes,
right? To be the included in the group, but not have that same skill set and background and those instincts. And so when he was good naturedly fumbling his way through through the story, I felt for him because I thought, yeah, that would probably be me. That
yes,
would, I would probably, that's the closest I would come probably to, you know, to getting it wrong,
yes.
or just not quite getting it right. So I really did feel for him. What I also like about the stories, and this one had seemed to have a lot of it, was the humor in it. I mean, these are spies. It could be a very serious story, and yet it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yes. Well, starting with Lloyd is one of my favorite characters because he is like us. He's every man. He's the beta male a lot of women really would like to marry because he'll have a nice dinner on the table for you at the end of the day. But I was looking at, the hero's journey, where the classic hero's journey is you start off with somebody who's very ordinary and ends up finding their inner courage to meet a terrible challenge. And that's what Lloyd does in this book. I mean, you're right. He is a little bit envious of these other four and the adventures they've had, the training they've had. He always feels like he's not quite up to snuff. And yes, it's true that when he first tries this, he fumbles a lot and he is not up to snuff, but he's moved by the most pure of motivations, and that is he loves his wife. He's even willing to look the other way with this ex-lover coming in, as long as he knows that Ingrid is safe. And that makes him like the most lovable creature you could possibly imagine. And then in the end, he does pull through and he does become the action hero, even though that goes wrong too. So yeah, and as far as the humor, I think it comes through these characters. It's who they are. One of the conflicts that I have introduced is the moral ambiguity of what it means to be a spy. We have the character Jo Thibodeau, who is the local police chief. She is she is like so straight arrow. She is like, you can't even, if she lies, she gets upset. She can't handle, being untruthful. And here she's dealing with people whose lives have been in the shadows, who are used to telling lies. And so that conflict in itself is funny. But you also see the conflict of, and there's one scene where they capture somebody you think is a bad guy, and they're about to try and force the truth out of him. And Jo Thibodeau is appalled. She said, "You're going to waterboard him? What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we would have done it out of your jurisdiction. It wouldn't be your fault." And of course, that doesn't make things any better because now she's upset. So I think that conflict is inherently funny.
Yeah, yeah. No, I do love Jo. The frustration she feels just comes right through the page of constantly, these people are constantly in her way and constantly a step ahead. And it
Yes.
must be, I just kept thinking, God, it must be so frustrating to try and do your job with these characters just running around. And I mean, they either have the information you don't have, or they're thinking laterally 3 steps ahead, or so yeah.
And they're willing to break the rules. And she
Right.
is the ultimate. I mean, she's like the classroom monitor. She doesn't
Right.
she doesn't want people to break the rules. So
Right, right. Sort of like herding cats. I mean, they're all over the place doing all these things, and she's just trying to
yes.
corral them and move them on. Oh, yes. Was this always a series for you? That when you had the idea for the first book?
No, it wasn't. I wrote the first book thinking that was my one-off spy novel. But as happens, and this is how series begin for me, is these characters grew on me. And by the end of the book, I thought, I don't want to leave you. I want to find out what you do next. And I want to be part of the Martini Club and drink and gossip and maybe not read the book for book club. So that's how the second book got started, is I wanted to find out what happened next. And then it kept going. So now I'm working on book four.
How do you keep track of it all? Because you've got a large cast of characters, and you give time to each of them
Mhm.
in turn, and you've got a number of different locales, and so I'm just curious how you track that over a series, or is it a case of I you write the book and then you go back and figure out, okay, what did I commit to?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me in tracking characters is how old are they?
Mm.
How much time has passed? And I get that wrong sometimes. I mean, sometimes I will have a character jump 2 years ahead, and then my copy editor catches me. Thank heavens for copy editors. But what I remember most, and I could keep track of that, is their trauma. What was the arc? What was the arc they went through, that they suffered through in the last book? I mean, that I can keep track of. But it's the little details, little things like what street do they live on? And I should probably have a chart, but I don't.
I mean, as a veteran of writing series, I guess I find that surprising that you don't keep
Yeah,
it somewhere.
I should be more organized. I mean, you think about these Hollywood writers' rooms where they probably have charts and Bibles and they know everybody's, second cousin's name. I don't. And so I am bound to make mistakes, and I just hope that somebody's there to correct me before it goes to print.
How do you keep a series enjoyable? I mean, because readers who are hooked on the characters just can't wait for the next book to come out. But as the author, as the writer, how do you keep it fun for you?
I think it all has to do with, do your characters have a challenge that's worthy of them? Um, is a crisis they're going to go through interesting enough? And so I always think of books, when I plan a book, it's always, what crisis am I going to put them through? For the Shadow Friends, it was the marriage. It was the temptation of an ex-lover coming back and threatening her life. And it was, how does Lloyd compete with that? So that was what made it fun for me, is watching the marriage. And then the next book, the fun is watching Joe Thibodeau make a terrible mistake and suffer for it.
Ooh. Oh, I bet she
A
suffers.
mistake, a mistake that she's embarrassed about and ashamed of and has to share with her family. And basically she goes to Italy. It's her first time in Europe. She wins a free trip to Italy through a raffle, gets to Italy, and is tempted into a one-night stand by a very handsome stranger. And then she disappears. So she has to live with that shame, because this is Joe, who never does anything wrong. But you're in Italy. What happens in Italy stays in Italy, right? That's what she figures, and of course it doesn't. It doesn't. But then I get to go back to this this moral ambiguity and the difference between her and the spies who are going, yeah, a one night stand, what's the big deal? And of course she's ashamed, and they don't see what the problem is.
Right, right. Oh, that's great. What has been the reaction from readers to, in particular, to these characters? Because you have older characters who are one spies, which is a really fun concept, but you also portray them as people of that age. They're neither sort of the old crones, right, which we
Yes.
see a lot in literature, or sort of these superhero characters. So
Yeah.
they're older, but they can still do everything. I mean, your characters have aches and pains, and they get tired, and they feel the cold, and like they experience things, real world things. What has been the reaction from readers to
Well,
that?
I think particularly my older readers are thrilled to see that these are characters like them. They're still vital. They still think. They're still active. They're not the ancient lady in her with her cane. Now, yes, you're right. They have the aches and pains of age, as as I have. Uh, they can't jump up from their gardens as fast as they used to. But I think a lot of older readers really appreciate that they are seen in such a good light. The other reaction I've had has been fascinating because I live in an area with spies. How many people have come up to me and said, "You've now cleared up something about my family." I've had several younger people say, "After I read your book, I understood why my family lived in 5 different countries and why I had 3 different passports. They never knew their father was covert." And that seems to be a common story I'm hearing. We never knew what our mom or my dad did. There was one man I know who actually gave a talk about his father. He said he had no idea until his dad died, and he was going through his papers in the garage and found out, oh my God, Dad worked for the OSS, and he had no idea. So that has been a sort of recognition for some children of covert operatives.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I was gonna ask you, have there been any surprises on this journey and writing this series, but in the journey as a whole? Imagine that as a big surprise. Like that was probably not your intention
No, I
when
didn't
you
know.
set out to write the book.
Yeah, and what's also fun is that so many people who, are kind of either spy adjacent or spies themselves will come up and tell me, "Did you know?" Or "Have you heard about?" So I'm hearing a lot more gossip about my town that I wasn't really sure of.
Oh,
A
interesting.
lot of different opinions about why spies ended up here. Why did they retire here? How did people find out? And there was a journalist who came up to write an article for Yankee magazine. The article's title was "The Spies of Camden, Maine." And he first became clued into it when one of his colleagues at the Washington Post who was working with the obituary said, "Isn't this funny? A lot of times when there's the obituary of a CIA person, they died in Camden, Maine. Why are they all dying in this little town?" So that got him investigating. And he said he had been a journalist for decades. He'd never been defeated by an article. This article defeated him because he could not get people to talk.
Mm.
So he changed his article to "Why would spies retire in Camden?"
Hypothetically
Yeah,
speaking.
hypothetically speaking. And he came up, and so he came up to interview me for his article, and we laughed about how it's like the one of the worst kept secrets. We all know about it, and yet it's a lot of it is gossip, and a lot of it we have no idea whether it's the truth we're hearing.
Right, right. So you've not been informed as to whether or not the fact that a writer has found herself in the midst of all these spies is a welcome thing for them.
You know, I
Nobody's.
I think they're all real. I think everybody is really amused by the whole thing, and I think if they really are spies, they think it's. I mean, I'm sure I get stuff wrong all the time, and they're probably in their little martini groups talking. And did you see what she
Ha
wrote?
ha ha! That's so funny. How
Yeah,
how naive that she thought how
well,
quaint that she
stupid,
thought that's how it worked.
stupid spy novelists. They don't know anything.
Well, you've been at this for a while.
Yes.
I'm curious about lessons learned over this
About writing in
journey?
general. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that you now understand or know or appreciate that you had no idea
Well,
was
when
the
I
case?
started off writing through, oh gosh, my first book was published in 87, so 40 years. When I first started writing, I thought it was all about plot. I thought it was about, you know, give them a good mystery, get the mechanics right, give them a surprise. And over the years, I've come to understand that plot is actually the way down on the list of what's important. What's important is that you feel what your characters are feeling, that you have that emotional connection to either the situation or to the people involved. And those have always been, I think, the books that my readers like the most. It's the book that moves them or the book that really evokes some kind of emotion.
Yeah. Is there anything you still struggle with? I mean, now, 40 years later, is there anything that still is difficult or challenging for you?
It's still, I mean, there's no easy way to write a book. Every
Mm,
time I sit down, I think, oh my God, I've lost it. I don't remember how I did it the last time. And um, I think the challenge for me is that because I do not outline ahead of time, I don't do it. I have no idea where the mystery's going. I always get writer's block about halfway to two-thirds of the way through. I don't know how to finish the book. I don't know why people are doing what they do or how these all these clues fit together. So in a way, I am just throwing these puzzle pieces on the table and figuring out how to put them together. And that's a struggle every time.
right, right. What an emotional roller coaster for you then every time you write a book to go from
Yeah,
enthusiasm to frustration to elation, I imagine at the end, every time.
it ages you. It's no, it is frustrating. And my family knows enough to know, oh, mom's going through that bad phase, leave her alone. Uh,
Mm,
and I also know I also have my own ways of dealing with it, which one of them is just to walk away from the manuscript for a couple of weeks, to take long walks, to get in the car and drive aimlessly. I find that long aimless drives really kind of loosen up something in the brain. And often I will come up with the solution to my figuring out how the puzzle pieces fit together during a long drive.
yeah, yeah. Do you remember the first thing you wrote? I mean, all those years ago, the first thing that you remember writing that was yours, your own idea that came out of your head. Do you remember?
Well, I hope you're not going back to my childhood because my first book I wrote at age 7.
Really?
And then I even illustrated it and bound it together with needle and thread. Um, it was about it was about a zebra that got lost in the jungle, which of course made no sense because zebras don't live in the jungle, but um and all the adventures he went through. So I was already writing suspense back then, even though my research had something to be desired. But the first time I wrote, my very first books were, as I said, romance novels, and it was my third attempt that finally I think I figured out how to do it. My first two books were throwaway books, and they ended up, I don't know where they ended up, probably in the trash. So I think what really happened was somewhere around two-thirds through that first manuscript, I thought, I know what's happening, and now I know who these characters are, and now I know how to solve the mystery. And that's when I felt like, oh, I'm a writer.
What do you think 7-year-old Tess would say if she knew as she's illustrating her zebra and running the thread through the pages? What do you think she'd say if she knew that this is what had happened?
I would say, Dad, you're wrong. because because when I was 7 and I told my dad I wanted to be a storyteller, he said, "There's no way to make a living at that," and which is why he pretty much urged me to go to medical school and why I became a doctor first. I mean, and he was right. He was right. It's a really hard way to make a living, and very few people are able to. So I feel incredibly fortunate. But there's a lot that goes into becoming a best-selling author. It's not just talent. It's the kind of personality that never gives up. The one who will look at a really bad piece of writing and say, I can fix that. So there's determination, there is talent, There's somebody who reads a lot and who has seen the structure of story that's been illustrated by other authors. And finally, there is luck involved.
Yeah, that's true. You can't deny that there's at least some of that.
Yes, it'd be the right place at the right time. And
Right.
I mean, there are some things, for instance, how did Rizzoli Isles become a television series? I think that was the luck of having a producer pick up one of my books and think I could turn this into a TV show. Um, so you don't know who's going to pick up your book. You don't know who is going to say, I want to do something more with this author.
Right. Right. And you never know when that's going to happen or
No.
how. I mean, so, and I think that's part of the magic of all of it. You just throw a story out there, put it out in the world, and see what ripple effects
And hope
happen.
it gets discovered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where do you go from here? You've got book 4 of the series. I assume this is a series you want to stick with for a while.
I will see at the end of at the end of book four. Right now, I'm in the midst of, oh my God, I've got to rewrite this first draft.
Mhm.
But it's been fun, and after that, I am getting involved a lot more in television writing. I have a script writing partner. We've done a couple projects together and sold a couple projects together. And right now we're working with Lifetime Television to do a wheel of movies. They've already filmed the first one, and so we're going to be working on the second one next. And that's been fun. Sometimes it's frustrating because you're no longer the master of your universe the way you are as a novelist.
Right.
And I'll see whether my characters have more adventures to tell me about.
Yeah. Anything you haven't done or tried yet that you still want to do?
I have had it in mind to do something that has more to do with medicine. For instance, I have really been fascinated by anesthesia, the history of anesthesia, and
Mm.
all the conflicts that went on with who was the first. But this would require going back and doing another historical. And I found historicals. I did one historical called the Bone Garden. That was a lot more work because of all the research that went into that. So that's still on my possible to-do list.
Okay, good. Well, while we are reading The Shadow Friends and waiting for book 4, if people want to learn more about you and the books and things that you have going on, where should they go to find you?
They can go to my website at tessgerritsen.com. I'm also at Facebook and on X and Blue Sky.
Wonderful. And if they want to purchase a copy?
Yes, they can buy it at their local independent, Books a Million, and there's always Amazon.
Right. Right. Good. Well, Tess, I want to thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I want to wish you luck with The Shadow Friends and book 4. We will eagerly await that one as well. And congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is all about helping readers discover new voices. This show brings you into conversation with authors from every corner of the writing world, and each of them has a story worth hearing. I'm your host, Stacey Horan, author of the Old City Mystery series and several standalone novels. Sharing conversations with fellow writers is one of my favorite parts of the creative life, and I'm thrilled to bring those conversations to you. Keep listening, keep exploring, and keep finding the stories that speak to you. There's always another treasure waiting here in the bookshop at the end of the internet.